Global Business Summit 2016, presented by Airtel and the Economic Times, was host to a high-powered discussion on power. Titled Global Power Scenario, The Decade Ahead, the discussion saw eminent speakers congregate to discuss current geopolitical trends affecting the oil industry and the Indian government's increased thrust towards renewable energy. The discussion also suggested changes to the policy framework so as to help companies meet deadlines, access new technologies, and cut down transmission losses.
I would like to take advantage of the presence of Mr. Erki here to talk about where do you see these geopolitical trends go, and are we sitting in a historical moment where the next generation is going to see today's developments as something significant that changed the history of the world?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that the most significant thing is that when I was born after the Second World War, we had 2.3 billion people in the world. Now we have 7.3 billion people. It means that we have never lived in a world like this before. And the main thing characterizing this world is growing interdependence. And this also means that many of the things that we thought were determining power and international relations in the world before, population, military power, and ownership of natural resources, oil and gas, they were determinant, and they were important. They still remain important, obviously, but they are not the most important thing. As we have seen all today, we would never, a few years ago, have imagined that oil prices would be as low as they are today. So things are changing. Oil and gas, what you need for oil and gas and anything is open access to markets. This is the key. You do not have to own the resources, but you have to have open access. And you have to have something you can give in return. And if you do not have natural resources, it is the human resources, the innovation, capacity, and everything else that humans can bring that you can exchange for this.
Coming back home, if you look at the power sector in India, the key issues that we find is not generation, it's the transmission and the distribution. And Uday, the scheme that this government has launched, seems to be the new answer. And I say it's a new answer because it's one of the many schemes that have been launched. Who better than Pawan to tell us what are the two critical factors, Pawan, to your mind, that could bring success to Uday?
Before specifically talking about Uday, I think it is important to talk about or just go back in history. This is not the first time an attempt of reform in distribution sector has been attempted. It virtually happens every decade. Perhaps the frequency is only increasing rather than coming down. But at every point of time, I think what we have seen is there are learnings that are incorporated, and one aspect about Uday that has that is noticeable in terms of the learnings that from the past that perhaps have been incorporated here is the involvement of the state. We've always known as state distribution entities as an extension of the state government, but they always have kind of remained distinct from the state government. And Uday changes that in a very dramatic manner, not only once, but I would say on an ongoing basis. And that perhaps is, in my opinion, the biggest reason why it should succeed in future. Immediately, if you look at the fact that Uday will allow about 15 states who are joining the scheme to reduce their interest costs as a result of transfer of debt to the state. That is one big difference that it will make. In our estimate, the total losses that the distribution companies in India today make are about 60,000 odd crore. And this financial engineering itself, if I can call it, you will see that the interest burden will shift away from distribution companies over the next 2 years, and the losses can reduce by to nearly half. I think that is the potential, and that would mean that the power deficit that we see for distribution companies come down. And not only that, which is a one-time measure, ongoing basis, the Uday talks about the sharing of losses, any potential future losses with the distribution companies and the state government and in a ratio which progressively increases, which implies that over a period of time, you should see state governments being more willing to reduce the losses, because else their own share of those losses will go up. But the biggest challenge will still be implementation of reduction in T&D losses, as well as the continued commitment to keep tariff hikes consistent with the increase in costs that we see.
Moving on, I would like to ask Mr. Sharma about the incentives that the government of India is providing to the renewable energy.
In India, the per capita consumption of electricity at present is around 900 units, which is 5% of the US consumption per capita and the 20% of the Chinese consumption per capita. It means if the India has to grow, if the Human Development Index has to improve, the per capita consumption of electricity has to improve. And we need to reach to around 4,000 per unit in the next 15-20 years to improve the Human Development Index in this country. Given this scenario, it means power generation has to grow in consequence of the demand for the power, which is going to increase in the next 1 to 2 decades. In case of the solar grid connected projects, government has split the target that the 40,000 megawatt or 40 gigawatt to come from the solar rooftops, and the remaining 60% come from the other state sector and other ground-mounted solar projects. Now, to enhance the investment in the solar rooftop projects, government has recently approved a policy in which the 10% of the 40,000 will be subsidized to make it more publicized, to make it commercialized in the years to come. And the 4,000 will come with the help of subsidies, and the remaining will be taken up by the market. And to improve the market situation, government is preparing an incentive scheme which is under finalization to motivate the market to come up and take up the rooftop projects. In case of the solar grid projects, ground-mounted solar grid projects, the government has announced various schemes, including the VGF funding, under which some percentage is given by the government, and government is also implementing the bidding process through which the government is asking to bid at which the unit will be provided. As a result, the solar, you have seen that the price per unit of the solar energy has gone down drastically, and the last bid it is 4.34 rupees per unit. In case of wind energy, apart from the tax holidays, government is already implementing the generation-based incentives to wind developers, under which some amount is given as a grant in aid per unit they generate by the developers. These are the two major schemes announced by the government in the renewable energy sector. Apart from this, the biomass, bioenergy, biogas, small hydro, we are also implementing some schemes which are basically subsidy schemes.
Let me turn to Mr. Ashwini. Now, the gigantic targets that the government of India has put for itself, 40% of the then requirement of 2030 to be provided from renewables, and solar seems to be the thrust. Mr. Ashwini, what kind of technological issues do you see in terms of solar playing when it comes to whether it is storage or it is last mile connectivity, or the whole invention about the solar cells, the PLFs that we see at 18 to 20%? What do you think are the technological issues that the solar energy sector is facing today, and where do you think the solutions lie?
India has set 40% energy from non-fossil fuel by 2030. As a country, do we think that it's a good idea that you built such big targets just based on the imported modules? I think somewhere we have to take a call, and that make in India, or these capacities, manufacturing capacities, have to come in India. So that's, I would say, one thing. Second, as far as concerned to technology is being evolved right now, and what I would like to see that in the coming 5 to 10 years, silicon technology is going to stay. New technologies are emerging, but if you just consider the big targets, then you have to see abundance of availability of materials. So silicon provides that option that you're not going to face any problems in that. So I think this technology is going to stay, and the in terms of efficiencies, the we are getting better and better. Right now, commercially available cells are 21%, 22% kind of efficiencies are there, but the real issue lies in the quality assurance. Like as a buyer, because what we are talking about 25 years PPAs, so it means and with some kind of at the most 20% degradation in the performance. So that's a challenge. If I am not able to buy good product today, so I think 25 years is a question. So it means if we want to achieve realistic these targets, one of the key issue is the quality assurance, and as a country we need to put that in place. But I think there are efforts, and I'm not saying that it's not happening, but that has to be given maybe more focus. That is one very important key point. Another is the transmission and evacuation system, and I would like to just apprise you that Government of India has taken a lot of initiative in order to remove these two problems. And if you see in the backdrop of, there is a scheme called Solar Park Scheme, which was brought out by the government, targeting 20,000 megawatt capacity in solar parks. If you connect the power from this solar park to, CTU system or STU system, wheeling charges and those kind of issues are there, and that makes it costlier. Then it means, again, the same problem that the cost of solar power increases. So Government of India took decisions that all these lines which are connecting the solar park to the CTU will be declared as ISTS. It means that cost is being socialized to other energy. So this kind of very positive, I would say, policy framework is there.
I would like to now ask Vijay, there are things that are happening which are quite disruptive, and power sector is absolutely no exception to it. Where do you see the unit charges would go, and what would be the disruption to the survival model of the renewable energy projects?
If we take the path that the telecom industry has followed over the past few years, once you build up a network, and if your revenue costs are zero, there is no reason why in India we cannot have the lowest energy costs in the world, especially when we have the lowest telecom tariffs in the world. In terms of disruption, I think the first step is to go and create a capacity so you get your per capita consumption up from about 900 kilowatt hours to maybe 4,000, 5,000 kilowatt hours. Create a lot of capacity in the renewable energy segment. Challenges are going to be there in the renewable energy segment. You will require a lot of support, either you call it subsidies or you call them incentives. We have seen that nowhere in the world has renewable energy grown without adequate incentives. And therefore, incentives would be very much required to put this on the path to growth. Once we grow, once we pick up momentum, things will get faster, easier, and we look forward, I'm sure all of us do, to the day when energy costs will be zero. Thank you.
Let me turn to Mr. Popley. I know that he has an obligation to leave in some time. Mr. Popley, you have been funding renewable energy projects over the last, let's say, couple of years or 3 years. What kind of trends you are seeing in terms of solar versus hydro versus the other renewable energy, and are you seeing mortality rates going up in your portfolio or in your experience?
Yeah, thank you. Till last year, if you look at the renewable energy portfolio, 70%, almost 60 to 70% was wind. 15% was cogeneration, 5% was hydro, 5 to 10%, and maybe 5% was solar. Now this year things have changed. We are neck to neck. The proposals that we are receiving are for wind and solar, and next year, of course, it will be for solar. It will be much higher. Now, if you look at solar, also we have also started receiving proposals for rooftop solar. Then there are proposals from farmers scheme. Punjab has done a large scheme. Those proposals are likely to come to us. Already we are in discussion. Then there are proposals that are coming from Karnataka that are also for farmers scheme. So things are changing. I mean, and lot of firms are taking interest in rooftop. Surprisingly, a lot of multinationals, they are coming for rooftop schemes because probably the tariffs are attractive and they find it more viable. A lot of proposals have come. Now coming to mortality rate, well, the proposals that were coming earlier were all with the tied PPA for 20 years. So even if when the tariff was 7 rupees, yes, they have a PPA for 25 years, so there is no question of mortality rate in those proposals, in those projects, because there were hardly any proposals where third-party sales were involved. They were there when REC was there. Since REC did not pick up, people had stopped doing that. They have stopped taking proposals like that. Then there were some proposals where they were selling power to corporate houses, industrial houses, where the tariffs are tied to the grid tariff. So industrial tariffs are higher, they are able to sell it, and if they go up, then these tariffs will also go up. This is the broad arrangement. So I don't think, I mean, if the tariffs have come down to 463, if they are tied back to back with the 25-year PPA, we don't see any issue if technically the projects meet otherwise all the issues. Thank you.
Yeah, let me turn to Mr. Babel. Mr. Popley mentioned about the rooftops, and one of the issues that we see in the US is that those guys who go rooftop off-grid, the transmission and distribution companies are asking the federal government or the relevant authorities that we have created infrastructure, we have spent our money for the population, and now this population says that we're going off-grid, we're not going to pay you. It's not a very good economic proposal. So there is already a dispute, so to speak, between the population at large and the distribution and the transmission companies who want to charge, though they are off-grid. The solution lies probably somewhere in doing something very smartly. And the smart meters was one of such things that the US did back in 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, and was quite successful. You've been into smart meters. What's your experience with smart meters? How it could be a game changer for India?
Incidentally, I was involved with the first launch of world's first smart meter. It was done in England and it was done in India simultaneously. So India was far ahead in electronic metering compared to US. Success stories with that, with smart meters in India. Delhi had losses of 55 to 60%. They're down to 10%, 8% now. West Bengal used smart metering effectively. From losses of 300-400 crores went into profits of 500 crores. Mr. Malade drove that. So it's not whether privately owned or government owned. Very recently, Manipur, which had huge losses of 60%, they called us, use prepayment meters, smart prepayment meters. Revenue went up by 55%. So the technology we use in smarts has to be cost effective. It has to be addressing. What has happened over the years is we can't define what do we need in time to come. You can't put a smart for today and then replace it. You can replace a smartphone every 2-3 years, but you shouldn't be and can't be replacing meters every 2-3 years. So we need to find out what does a smart do in a system. It's a sensor which can give you information about billing, about peak demand, about systems, about connect, disconnect, and can go end to end to the smart grid. And that's what smart sensors should be used at. It can help immensely in reducing theft, which has been proven by a lot of these private utilities and also some government utilities. So it can be done, but we must look at long term and we must look at ownership cost rather than initial cost.
Thank you very much, all of you.
Welcome to the Global Business Summit, Mr. Karya. What have been your insights, and you were on a panel just now. What was that all about?
I think the power sector woes today are known to the whole country, and the government has tried to roll out a few reforms which hopefully should revitalize and refinance the power sector. So questions were on the innovations that need to come into the power sector, what kind of policies need to come, what are the opportunities, what are the threats, and I believe the session went off very well, huge amount of interest generated.
Right. So currently there are about 8 ministries involved in the power sector. The states have their own ministries in turn. Is there a need for simplification of processes and perhaps a centralized system for clearances?
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head that the power sector is besieged by a lot of red tapeism, by different policies across different states, across different utilities, and with the center. We need to have a comprehensive and centralized power policy which all states have to follow. And like the telecom policy, which is centralized, therefore the telecom segment could grow so much. If the power segment is similarly centralized with some central policies, we would see a lot more growth, we would see a lot more impetus.
And as a solar power producer today, what's your biggest challenge?
So, let's talk about solar in 3 possible segments. At a megawatt scale, you've seen record low tariffs of 4 rupees 34 paise coming in recently. But there is a lot of red tapeism yet that the industry is mired in terms of finance, in terms of approvals, in terms of number of bodies that you have to approach to get certificates. That whole process needs a lot of simplification. In fact, I am absolutely for abolition of all subsidies and just give a 100% depreciation to the solar segment, and that's controllable. Keep it simple and you will see the segment grow. The costs of the subsidies will far outweigh the benefits, because today understand that India loses almost 1 lakh crore rupees per year in terms of power losses. Right. And you have 300 million people who do not have access to electricity in India. So if you are able to provide affordable solar solutions at village levels, you are speeding up very rapidly the Prime Minister's vision and ideology for providing 24/7 power to all within the next 2 to 2.5 years' time.
You think solar is going to be one of the major contributors to that vision?
Absolutely. See, India is a country which is blessed with huge amount of solar irradiation, and if we take just the solar map, India can supply electricity or energy to the entire world just by the amount of irradiation that we have. Plus we have got wind, plus we have got wave. So with the combination of these 3 technologies, I personally feel that the Prime Minister is absolutely spot on for wanting to have at least 40% of our electricity generated through non-fossil fuels. And that's a spot on and very, very well thought out plan.
Right. And as far as off-grid solutions are concerned, what more is required to make these more feasible, and how much of a contribution will those make towards the PM's vision of power for all?
The key to giving a thrust and impetus to this industry is now to make it off-grid and also create solutions or create a technology which we can enhance the on-grid solutions. We believe that this idea of decentralized off-grid would actually reach out to a lot of villages would reach out to a lot more consumers, because the cost of transmitting and distributing energy to a small hamlet or a village of about 400, 500 people is much, much more. The administrative cost is much, much more than the cost of energy itself.
Right.
So let the utilities focus on the larger and well-populated areas, and let there be decentralized solar solutions, which would mean power to all, maybe even earlier than what the Prime Minister wants.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Karia. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you, ma'am.